Hey guys, welcome once again to our channel. Today we're going to be doing a 4-color CMYK separation for screen printing. Right here in the screen we have a file that is a PNG. It's actually in a transparent background, which is important. We need that. Every time we're going to be doing a separation is crucial that our file, in fact, is in a transparent background. We're going to go into image size, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check what the size of this file is. So if we have to make an adjustment, we might as well start now. We don't want to resize the image after we've already done everything else we're going to be doing in this video. Being the fact that this is a screen print design, it would probably be best to have it down to like a 10 and a half, something in that neighborhood. 10 and a half, 11 inches. That's a typical size for a large or extra large design on a shirt. The resolution is at 300 dpi, which is very important that we do not try this process in anything less than 300. So 300 is the minimum that we need to be working at. And so we're going to click OK here. And there we go. We got our size at 10 and a half, 300 dpi file. And we're going to start the process of separating. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to come over here to our section where our layers are. And when you're doing a separation like the CMYK, you're not really going to be using layers so much as channels. So channels, as I switch over to them, I see that I am in an RGB format. So in the first thing we need to do is basically come here to image mode, and we're going to switch it from RGB over to CMYK. Color settings that we have in this computer right now in our Photoshop, it's using the US web coded. That's a very popular profile. Most people choose one particular profile over another. We're going to stick with what we've been working with till now. Seems to be working for us just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So now if you take notice, we actually now have our channels in CMYK. So if I highlight each of them independently, you can actually see the separated colors on each one of them. So we're going to select them all. And the next thing we're going to do is come over here to filter. And we're going to basically apply what we call a halftone filter. Now, why are we doing that? Well, we're basically doing that because if I zoom in here, let's say into this cyan file that I separated, the first thing I'm going to notice is that I have some black areas, some solid black areas, but then I also have some darker grays and lighter gray areas, which obviously it's what creates a gradient. But I'm not really able to output this channel as it is because I won't be able to basically burn that. So the next step is to basically apply a color halftone filter to this image before we actually get to output the film. So we're going to come here to filter, pixelate. We're going to go to color halftone. You're going to get this window to pop up. The recommendation would be to really go to a max radius of 4. You're going to leave these angles and degrees in the suggested Photoshop default. We're going to click OK. So depending on the resolution of your file, you will get a slight pixelation, and that is to be expected. What we want to do is double check that in fact our image resolution is at 300 or higher, because that will guarantee that our actual dots are small enough to not be noticed. So you want the creation of the dots to not overtake the resolution of the image. So it is important that we double check that first. So we did do that. We have it at 300. It's okay if the image is higher. It could be 450, Could be 600 dpi. Obviously, the higher the resolution, the less those dots would be pronounced, and that is important. So we're going to stay at 300 dpi because that seems to work for this image rather well. But I want to do is I want to isolate the channels again, and I want to look and zoom into the cyan once again. And what once was a gray area, it's now filled with dots. And these dots vary in size and proximity to each other to basically create that gradients that we are now seeing, which is crucial to get that color blend as you plan to print the cyan and the magenta and the yellow and the black, and that should give you the final image on your press. Now, we're midway here through this process. So until now, the most important steps that we've covered are obviously making sure that the size that we want the file to be, we do make that change prior to applying this filter that we did, this color halftone filter, and the resolution of the file. Those are the two most important steps that we need to make sure. And then after that, we can break up the channels into CMYK and apply the filter as we did. The next step is going to be to set up a registration mark. And for that, obviously, we need a little bit more canvas space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the crop tool and kind of pull up here slightly the canvas on the top and the bottom. And then basically I'm going to place the registration mark on the top first. And I want to use a font that is easy for us to identify on the press, okay? And I also want to make sure that that registration mark is large enough to be able to be seen on when I'm on the press setting up the registration. So I'm going to use something bold and easy to spot. Again, if you want to select a different font, like maybe Arial, obviously that can work as well. I'm going to use something kind of rather skinny, it's not too thick of a file and of a font, and that should be good enough. I'm going to also go ahead and set up this registration mark in the middle of my document. So top center, and what I'm doing is I'm getting basically these purple lines that are telling me that I am actually in the center here. If you don't get your lines to pop up automatically, hey, just make sure that under view and under show, you have the smart guides selected. So double check that, obviously. Another thing too that I want to make sure you guys do is also turn on your rulers when you start working, because Photoshop and these Adobe programs, they remember pretty much your preferences. So that means that every time you load another file, you'll get your ruler to pop up. You'll get your everything in view as far as your smart guides and so on. So anyway, I want to make sure that is. Another thing that sometimes people tell me that happens to them is that when you select an object inside Photoshop, you should be able to get these points right here on the top and all around the image. So these are basically your transformation controls. And you have to make sure that when you are in your moving tool, which is this one right up here, right? You want to make sure that this check is on this box, because this is telling Photoshop that you want to show your transform controls, which it does. Same thing if I select this one right here, I'm also getting that. So anyway, I want to go ahead and make a copy of this this registration mark, because I want to place another one at the bottom under here, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Alt key on my keyboard, and then I'm going to click and drag. Okay. Now, if I hesitate here and I kind of move it off to the side a little bit, if I have that issue, then what I would do is I would immediately hold down the Shift key on the keyboard as I'm dragging it down. That's going to make sure that it stays right where it needs to be, in alignment to the top one, okay? And then I'm going to let go the mouse before I let go of the shift. And then by doing that, it's going to drop it right in the spot where it needs to stay, and it won't drop it anywhere else. Okay. So now I have my file separated. I have my filter for color halftone applied. And I also have my registration marks. So I'm pretty much ready to go. I do prefer to set the registration marks in the middle. However, there are those of us who prefer the registration marks on four corners. Again, it's up to you entirely whether you prefer a 4-point registration or you prefer something top and bottom. At the very least, you should have one on the top and one on the bottom. So that seems to work for us. So that's what we prefer. The next step is going to be obviously to move to output the channel. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to select the cyan first, okay? And then I'm going to go File, Print. So when I do that, I'm going to select my printer. I'm going to basically select my print settings. And it's important that when you output this with the same idea that you do with anything else that you print on a film for screen printing exposure. You want to make sure that that black is as solid as possible. So for that, I recommend you guys looking on our website. We do have print settings for most inkjet printers, Canon or HP or Epson, which is the most commonly used for our industry. In there, you can also set up your not only your quality, but you're also going to reduce your speed, print speed, so that it prints slower and deposits more ink. You're going to select your size of the print sheet, with whether it's 11 by 17 or 13 by 19, and then lastly, you're going to want to label this particular channel. So we know the difference film from the cyan to the magenta to the yellow to the black. It's important that we do that so we don't mark it. And that's something that Photoshop can do in your print settings when you're going to send it to print. As soon as we have all of these particular channels printed on our films, then we could proceed to code our screens. Now, coding our screens for a CMYK job, preferably and always should be a 305 mesh. Some folks like to go a little higher. They like to go to 355. Absolutely, you can do that if you want higher resolution. One of the things that I encourage customers is to double check with us if perhaps you have something like a 280 or a 275 mesh. Again, it's not too far from 305, but you will lose some resolution. You will lose some dots in the process of developing. So it's important that you guys kind of stay with the recommended 305 for the CMYK. One of the other things that most customers ask us is, does it matter in which order I'm going to print the colors? And yes, the answer is yes to that. We need to make sure that on the press, we are working with cyan, magenta, yellow, and black in that order. These colors, even though all of them are specifically made for this process, they need to be printed in that order in order for the color outcome to be what you have here up on the screen. Otherwise, you'll suppress some of the tones because some of these inks are actually, some of them are stronger than others. So if you substitute the place of the yellow as well as the cyan or the magenta or even the black, then what's going to happen is the print is going to look very muddy. It's not going to look color accurate. And so you want to avoid that. And the last tip that I can give you guys when you're printing CMYK, and obviously you're printing it on a manual press or on an automatic press. If it's on an automatic press, for sure you're not going to have really any issues with consistency because the machine is going to print every time in the same pressure, the same angle. What happens in a manual press is that you're printing pretty much, with a unique force, and every individual prints differently and applies a different pressure. And we as humans can't really be as consistent as a machine would be. So what I recommend you guys to do is when you guys embark on doing CMYK for the first time, practice your printing. Make sure that you guys are pushing that squeegee with the same pressure or as much the same pressure as you do every time. Because if I apply a different pressure, say between the magenta and the cyan, then what's going to happen is that cyan or magenta could potentially increase the tone, and now the hue of the color will be different. And so we want to make sure that every print from number 1 up to number 100, they all come out with the same, view of color. We don't want anything to look any different or darker, especially with the black. That's always a hard color to print in CMYK because the black is so thin. Sometimes a lot of people substitute the 305 mesh and they go to like a 280 or a 230. When you do that, you're definitely going to be depositing more black ink, and that's going to darken the image severely. So keep that in mind. Make sure that you are working in a 305 every time, and you try to stay consistent with your pressure. Again, it's a must when it comes to outputting the same consistency on the designs. So anyway, that's it for me today. I just wanted to leave you guys with this quick separation tip. And if you guys have any other questions about this video or anything else, feel free to reach out to us at 305-512-2222 or send us a quick email, sales@floridaflex.com. Thanks again, guys. Really appreciate you guys watching.